Welcome to Biology with Mrs. Ignacio. Today we're going to be looking at Lesson 4. We're going to start with Lesson 4A. So let's jump right in. So last time we were talking about the cell membrane, and the organelles that lie within the cell. Now we're taking a closer look at cellular metabolism. So we have to understand, first of all, the difference between heterotrophs and autotrophs. So autotrophs are organisms that prepare their own food through the process of photosynthesis. Now, heterotrophs are organisms that cannot prepare their own food, and they depend upon autotrophs for nutrition. So your plants would be considered an autotroph, and humans would be considered heterotrophs. So these organisms, again, are classified by how they obtain energy. Autotrophs are producers. They make their own food. Heterotrophs are known as consumers because they are organisms that depend on other organisms for their food. And it's neither good nor bad. That's just the circle of life, okay? So when we think about cellular metabolism, we're going to look closely at what happens in our autotrophs. Autotrophs go through a process that is called photosynthesis. And this is a process by which autotrophs absorb energy from the sun, and they convert it to stored chemical energy. So again, photosynthesis is a process by which these autotrophs, are plants mainly, right? They absorb energy from the sun, and they convert it or change it into a stored chemical energy. So in order for photosynthesis to happen, plants need sunlight, air, and water. So plants need sunlight, air, and water for photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is really amazing, and it occurs in two phases. So there is the light-dependent phase and the Calvin cycle. So our autotrophs use a process that is called photosynthesis, where they absorb energy from the sun and they convert this energy into a stored chemical energy. In order to accomplish the process of photosynthesis, these plants will need sunlight, they will need air, and water. Photosynthesis occurs or happens in two phases. There is the light-dependent phase, and then secondly, the Calvin cycle. Let's take a closer look. All right, so we need to find out what's going on in a cell a portion of the cell that's an organelle that is within plants. We're going to look at chloroplasts. So chloroplasts are the organelles that are found only in autotrophs, and they're responsible for photosynthesis. So chloroplasts are the organelles that are found only in autotrophs, and the chloroplasts are the ones that are responsible for photosynthesis. So here in this slide, you see a picture of a chloroplast, and you do see some parts of the chloroplast. The first part that we'll look at is the thylakoid. So the thylakoid is a specialized disc that is inside the chloroplast. So thylakoids, they are specialized discs. They have a special job, and they are living or lie inside the chloroplast. Next, we have the grana, and those are actually stacks of thylakoids. Makes me think of stacks of pancakes, to be quite honest with you. Okay, so grana, those are the stacks of thylakoids. Next, we have the stroma. The stroma is the fluid-filled area around the grana. You can consider your stroma as that maple syrup, okay? That's covering your beautiful green pancakes that are made of thylakoids, right? Those stacks are the grana, stacks of pancakes, but an individual pancake is a thylakoid. Chlorophyll is the fourth item that we'll take a closer look at, and this is a green pigment that is responsible for absorbing light, taking in, soaking up that light, and they are found in clusters inside the thylakoid membrane. Okay, so when we think about our autotrophs, we think of the process of photosynthesis. In order for photosynthesis to occur, we need to have chloroplasts. Some parts of the chloroplast are the thylakoid, which are those specialized discs. Stacks of these specialized discs are called grana, and stroma is the fluid area that's around the grana. And we said that the grana were stacks of pancakes, and the stroma is that fluid, is the maple syrup. Now, chlorophyll is a green pigment that is responsible for absorbing light, and chlorophyll is found in clusters in the thylakoid membrane. All right, that concludes lesson 4A. Let's take a look at lesson 4B. We mentioned that photosynthesis occurs in two phases, the light-dependent phase and the Calvin cycle. So let's take a look at the light-dependent phase. This is the first part of photosynthesis. Again, it is known as the light-dependent phase. And so this part of photosynthesis is the process by which plants convert energy from sunlight into ATP. ATP is adenosine triphosphate. And this process where the energy from sunlight is converted, right? This happens in the thylakoid membrane of the cell, okay? So this is the light-dependent phase of photosynthesis. The second phase is the Calvin cycle. And in this first part of photosynthesis, the light-dependent phase, we know that plants convert energy from sunlight into ATP. ATP is adenosine triphosphate, and this is all taking place in that thylakoid membrane of the cell. Let's take a deeper look at photosynthesis, the light-dependent phase. So molecules called photosystems absorbed energy from the sun. This energy splits water, which is H2O. For every 2 hydrogen, there is 1 oxygen, so H2O is water. So this energy splits water in the plant into hydrogen and oxygen molecules. In photosynthesis, oxygen is released into the air. The remaining hydrogen ions and electrons are passed through an electron transport chain. That's pretty neat. This results in ATP and NADPH being made. You're probably wondering what NADPH stands for. Well, it stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate hydrogen. So a real mouthful. NADPH stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate hydrogen. This molecule plays a crucial role in some of the chemical reactions that takes place during photosynthesis. Okay, so during this light-dependent phase, the first part or the first phase of photosynthesis, molecules called photosystems, they absorb energy from the sun, This energy then splits your H2O into hydrogen and oxygen molecules. So it's splitting the water apart, and oxygen is released into the air. That hydrogen that's left behind are hydrogen ions, and they are passed through the electron transport chain. And this results in ATP and NADPH being made. And remember, NADPH is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate hydrogen. So there's a lot of great things going on in this first phase, this light-dependent phase. So let's talk about the second phase of photosynthesis, which is known as the Calvin cycle. And this is the process by which the plant produces glucose for food. How amazing is that? So in photosynthesis, the second part or the second phase is known as the Calvin cycle. And this is the process by which the plant produces glucose for food. So let's take a look at this Calvin cycle a little closer. So the Calvin cycle occurs in the stroma of the chloroplast, and so that's your fluid-filled area. A molecule of carbon dioxide, which is CO2, C is carbon, O is oxygen, and that means there's two oxygen. So carbon dioxide, a molecule of carbon dioxide from the air diffuses, it passes through the cell membrane and gets into the cell. Also in the Calvin cycle, this molecule of carbon dioxide is going to bind to a 5-carbon sugar, which will make it a 6-carbon molecule. So that carbon dioxide diffuses into the cell, it binds to a 5-carbon sugar, and now we have a 6-carbon molecule. This unstable 6-carbon molecule quickly splits into 2 3-carbon molecules. Okay, so in the Calvin cycle, we know that this process is being taking place in the stroma of the chloroplast, that's the fluid-filled area. And we know that in the Calvin cycle, this molecule of carbon dioxide diffuses into the cell and it binds to a 5-carbon sugar and it makes a 6-carbon molecule. Now, this is an unstable molecule. It is a 6-carbon molecule that is unstable. It will quickly split to form 2 3-carbon molecules. So these molecules, the two of them each have 3 carbons. Okay? So the other thing that happens with in the Calvin cycle is that ATP, adenosine triphosphate, contributes energy, and NADPH contributes hydrogen to the 3-carbon molecules, and we now make 3-carbon sugars that are called G3P. So you may be wondering, what does G3P stand for? G3P stands for glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. So this is a product of what happens during the Calvin cycle. Okay, so ATP contributes energy, and the NADPH contributes hydrogen to the 3-carbon molecules into 3-carbon sugars, and these 3-carbon sugars are called G3P, which also means glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. So it does take 6 Calvin cycles happening at the same time to create one molecule of glucose plus a 5-carbon sugar for each of those 6 cycles to be able to begin again. Okay, so again, it takes 6 Calvin cycles happening at the same time to create one molecule of glucose plus a 5-carbon sugar for each of those 6 cycles to be able to begin again. In this way, the Calvin cycle recycles the same molecules over and over again. Okay, so the Calvin cycle is kind of, you can think of them as a recycler, right? Because they use or recycle the same molecules over and over again. Quite amazing. This is the end of our presentation of Chapter 4 or Lesson 4. Think critically, stay curious, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.